Emmanuel, I'm not yes, I asked for. And I would like for you to go to where Dr. Sarah is so that she can be ready for the session which is starting in the next minute. Can I get the video from the on-site on now, please? I need to know that Dr. Sarah is seated where she'll be able to make any comments or speak when it is time for her to speak. We need to check that and then check sound. I see you were knocked out by internet. Please, can you put the video on and let Dr. Sarah, let me see where Dr. Sarah is. We start in a few minutes. I want to know that she's in a place that she can speak. I'm talking to ICF 23 Port Harcourt screen, virtual screen right now. Please. Hold up, no, they did.
Hello? Ica, can you hear us?
I can hear you from. Good morning.
Good evening from India.
Morning from Nigeria.
Yeah. So once when we are ready, we can start. We are also getting ready. I think that's, I just wanted to check the video and the audio.
That's fine. That's fine. We're also trying to do those last minute checks too.
Yes, yes, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Also, ICA 23 Port Harcourt, please may I check your video? Thank you. Thank you. Please, can you do a sound check with Dr. Sarah for me? Sound check, please. Sound check. We need to be sure that when she's speaking, others are hearing. Thank you so much. Guys, we don't have more than a minute left. Can I have the sound check with can I have sound check with Dr. Sarah, please? Sound check with Dr. Sarah, please. Please give her the microphone. Let her speak. Let's be sure that we can hear her. It's more important to hear her than to see her. Stop adjusting the screen. Just let's hear Dr. Sarah speak. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me, please? Hello, everyone. Okay, so this is muted. Let me. Mic check. Mic check. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can. We can hear you clearly.
Great. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Already sent them. Or will you pick up here?
Are we? You're muted. Did you put your sound? Okay. Hello, Professor Padma. Hello, Prof. Manipal, can you hear me, please?
Hello? 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 Can you hear me, Ica?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So just 2 minutes, we are just setting it
We
up.
are not supposed to
Then
mute it because we
can
are using
start.
that one. And this one is not connected to sound. So
No, my
the
phone is down.
phone is on this. Okay.
Okay, not doing that again.
Okay, it's not doing that again.
Should we give another 5 minutes?
Should we give another 5 minutes to let some more people
That would
time?
be okay. 5 or 10 minutes. Is that okay with you? Hello?
Okay, communications are crossing lines and we don't know who is speaking at the moment. It's like the background noise is filtering into what is meant to be transmitted.
Okay, so you cannot
Okay, so you cannot hear me well. Is that what you're saying?
Dr. Moses.
Is that what you're saying, Dr. Moses?
No, I can hear you, but there is a lot of echo and then some background noise in the background.
Oh, there's a background noise. Okay.
Oh, there's
But I was
okay, we'll
hoping
fix that.
Manipal
But I
can
was hoping that
hear
Manipal
me.
can hear
Can
me
we
even if
wait
it
for another 5 to 10 minutes to allow others to join us? Is that a good
thing. Would you?
Okay with you?
Is that okay with you?
And you the echo.
Sound from here. But will you the video? You get it? You can still do the video, but you.
Okay. Yeah. There's a terrifying tunings. Have been transmitted to an internet.
File also here. You know how we use this one?
Hello, Port Harcourt. Can we start?
Okay, the chair.
Hello, Ekta, Port Harcourt. Can we start?
Hello,
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
clearly.
I can hear you
Alright.
clearly. Even
This
I
is-
can hear you clearly.
What did she say? Prof, you
That she
hear
can hear you very clearly. Our municipal hub is already standing by and they can access it clearly. Your audio is very good.
Thank you. Okay, so Prof Padma, I was saying that perhaps we leave it to begin at like 12:10 to allow some more people join, or is that okay with you, or should we just get on?
Okay, you want some more people to join in? Doesn't matter. We can wait for some time till the others also join in.
Is that fine? Is that fine with you?
Yes, it's fine. We are ready, but let the other people, if they join in, we'll start then. You can let me know when to start.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's also an echo in your voice. So can you just check for it?
Yes, we're checking on that as
Yeah.
well. See whether if you on. Is
this better now?
Remove that, unplug the mic. Do we still have the echo?
Yeah, a bit of it, but I think we can tolerate that can be tolerated.
We're trying to fix it so it doesn't even come up at all.
Okay.
Did you off it? Is it okay now?
Yeah, it is.
Can you hear from here?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. I think the echo is fine. It's fine.
Beautiful background from your colleagues and beautiful collaborations.
Can you connect a speaker to this? I used to have a small speaker. I wish I knew how to. They're saying they can't hear.
We can hear.
Did you hear what that person is saying?
Maybe you should come here then. Maybe you have to come because it is ground. Therefore.
The sound was just fine recently.
Not now.
Professor Padma, I believe that we can start now.
Ink the waste as already full and can see it on the floor.
We'll start now then.
See it on the floor.
Yes,
Okay. Good evening from ICA Manipal Regional Hub and also to ICA Port Harcourt, Nigeria. Today, it's a truly collaborative panels that we are having between Nigeria and India. The topic for our panel discussion is narrative and counter narratives, utilizing communication scholarship to influence perception and realities of socio-economic development. Human Development Index is based on standard of living, level of education, and health of the people. Economic indicators such as per capita income are considered as the indicators of development. But both economic and non-economic factors are indicators of the socio-economic development. There have been two main approaches to development, and these can be distinguished on the basis of fight against poverty and analysis of long-term economic and socio-economic development. The trend in thinking about development issues has varied since the World War II. There are some generalizations on developments that are no longer tenable as generalizations in the light of empirical information available to us now. One is developing countries are trapped in a vicious cycle of stagnation. Second, given the pace of population growth, food scarcity in developing countries will always be a problem. Third, agriculture and mining exports cannot contribute to economic development, and dependence of developing countries on advanced economies lead to a net outflow of capital. And the rapid population growth is a threat to development. Now, the debate on issues of socio-economic development are characterized by numerous clashing perspectives and theories and deep differences of opinion. Based on these background is why we decided to have a panel of this nature on narratives and counter narratives and perception and realities of socio-economic development. And today we have scholars both from India and Nepal and Nigeria discussing about these issues. The first panelist on the panel is Dr. Vinod Pavarala, a professor of communication and Dean, Sarojini Naidu School of Communication, University of Hyderabad. He's taught at the University of Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, and the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, and has been a visiting fellow at Princeton University. For over 5 years, he's been one of the leading campaigners for a national policy on community radio and has played a significant role in the drafting of the policy approved by the Union Cabinet in late 2006, permitting community-based organizations to start their own radio station. Pavrala sir is the author of Interpreting Corruption, which looks at the social construction of corruption in India. He also is the UNESCO chair on community radio and has published a number of books on community radio in India, as well as on policy issues regarding community radio. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Padmarani, for that introduction. And thanks for making me part of this, what should we say, inter-regional collaborative panel. I'm happy to be here. So what I'm going to talk about today is an idea that I have called intangible outcomes. And I'm looking at intangible outcomes of communication for social change. In the course of working on community radio and during our field works in India and in other countries, myself and my colleagues have traveled to interior rural areas in different parts of the world, and we repeatedly encountered people talking about the consequences of community radio in ways that defy very easy measurement. For example, they would say it helped foster identity. It nurtured local language and culture. It built capacities for self-expression, or that it forged community solidarity. Last year, when we were in rural West Bengal to study the role of theater of the oppressed in addressing issues of gender discrimination, one woman told us, and I'm quoting her, "We have now tasted freedom and we are not going to allow our menfolk to lock us up in the house anymore." Now, the gender empowerment implicit in that statement is clearly something that eludes very easy measurement, right? Although it may in the long term have some tangible effects, right? So there's now tremendous amount of scholarly literature on communication for social change. A lot of it studies impact, effects of communication on individual behavior and social change. All of them talk about it within a certain hegemonic evaluation matrix that emerged as an integral part of what some scholars have called the corporatization of communication for social change. Now, these approaches, as many of you know, privilege the observable, the concrete, the simple, and hence the measurable outcomes of directed social change, neglecting the more complex, the emergent, the processual, and therefore what I call the more intangible outcomes, right? So I mean, this is something that I have written about elsewhere, and this is what I'm trying to put on the table for discussion. How do we bring intangible outcomes? And also I'm looking at why is it that we have neglected intangible outcomes? Sally Engel Merry provides a very scathing critique of the imperative for quantitative data that suggests that there is an epistemological bias towards a more positivistic, evidence-based research. And there is also a global governance discourse with a requirement for accountability. And this accountability is not accountability to the grassroots, not downward accountability, but upward accountability to funding agencies, to donor agencies. So this imperative for evidence-based research and the requirement for accountability in the global governance discourse are factors responsible for what Sally Engel Merry calls the seductions of quantification, right? So therefore, the focus is always on tangible and measurable outcomes. So governments, international donor agencies, multilateral organizations, policymakers, NGOs, each of them keep feeding off a spiral of targets, benchmarks, indicators, and so on, right? I mean, if some of you have done work on communication for social change, you find this very familiar. They're always asking us for what are the indicators for this. So some of them seem to acknowledge that there are things like intangible outcomes, and they go on a futile search for how to measure the immeasurable, how to tangibilize the intangible, right? So they go into quantitative analysis of qualitative assessments, or they are trying to look at what are called proxy indicators. So if somebody says, they are a happy community, then you want to operationalize happiness in some quantitative terms so you can measure it. So this compulsion to produce quantitative indicators is a function of both a certain technology of knowledge production and is also a certain also an outcome of a certain discourse of governance, right? Which submerges local particularities, local idiosyncrasies, and they want to put all of this into certain universal categories. Knowledge that is standardized and comparable across countries and regions. That's why you have indexes and so on. So this idea of intangible outcomes, I feel will become more relevant if we start looking at, if you look at communication for social change as a set of programs and policies that must necessarily bring about change in the lives of marginalized groups in society. So it is imperative that evaluations that seek a more fine-grained understanding of the entire range of processes of change must incorporate some ways of listening to the voices of those who are excluded on the basis of class, race, caste, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so on. So going beyond the typical discourse of voice in participatory communication literature, we need to draw some attention to the importance of listening. And this is also about institutional listening, that institutions need to listen to marginalized voices. If methodologically all that one is interested in is to recognize and measure predetermined tangible results of social change communication, then there is no methodological imperative, leave alone political imperative, to listen to other voices that could potentially offer insights to intangible transformations. So our failure to account for intangible outcomes arises out of not only political indifference to democratic participation and social justice, but also an epistemological neglect and epistemological disregard for marginalized knowledges. Now there is a lot of literature, people like Boaventura de Sousa Santos, the Portuguese sociologist, and others have been talking about epistemic justice and the need to incorporate marginalized, submerged knowledges. So when we bring in those things, we will automatically turn our attention to more intangible outcomes in the social change process. So I'll probably have a little time to explain this later perhaps. One of the things I'm suggesting is we need to adopt a more interpretive framework in our research and in our evaluation work, moving away from the more quantitative positivistic biases to be able to get to the intangible outcomes. And I think we should also abandon what the corporatized communication for social change initiatives have come up with to try and tangibilize the intangible, to go in search of proxy indicators and so on. And there are several examples. I mean, those of us who know about Bhutan and its happiness index, right? I mean, it's a highly romanticized idea that here is a country that measures its well-being through happiness. But I don't know if anybody, listening to me today has actually looked at how is it done. There are 9 broad parameters. Every parameter is broken down into indicators. And so happiness ultimately comes down to some scores that people have got on various things. So some Bhutanese scholars have said, it's a very un-Buddhist thing to reduce happiness to a set of measurable indicators, but it's been done. Even something as intangible as happiness that we celebrate with respect to Bhutan, people have tried to quantify it and tangibilize it, right? And I'm trying to say that our work on communication for social change, on development communication, whatever you call, will be much enriched if we open our eyes to the intangible outcomes of the interventions in people's lives, right? I mean, whether it's toilet constructions in Swachh Bharat programs in India, or encouraging girl children to go to school. It's not just about how many girl children have gone to school since my program. That's a tangible indicator. But it's also about girl children becoming more confident, more assertive, self-confident in their interactions. So how do we talk about these things in our social change literature? That's what I'm talking about. So let me stop here, and then I'll come back if there is an opportunity to explain further. Thank you.
Ekta, now, thank you, Dr. Pavrala, and we'll have a second round again, and you'll surely have opportunities to further elaborate on this. Ekta George, now you could take us over to Nigeria and introduce your panelists, and we could have one person from Nigeria speak.
Yes. Is that fixed now? All right. So thank you, Professor Vino. That was an interesting start to our program today. Sorry, we suffered some power outage, but I think it will be fixed in a bit. Yes. So I'm going to introduce the next speaker on this panel from Nigeria, and she's none other than Dr. Sarah Chidiebere Joe. Dr. Joe is spotlight. Dr. Joe is the head of Department Development Communication in Rivers State University, Nigeria. And she holds a PhD in Communication and Media Studies from the University of Huddersfield in the UK, and a master's degree from the UK, all of which focus on media framing, political conflicts, social media affordances, and conversations about Nigeria's Niger Delta region. Dr. Sarah is a member of the Technical Working Group of Nigeria's Medium-Term National Development Plan and Nigeria Agenda 2050 Plan. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Sarah Joe to speak on this panel session as the next speaker. Please.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like to say a massive thank you to the Manipal community and of course the Nigerian community. And a massive thank you especially to Dr. Ica George for the amazing work she's doing from here. And then thank you again to IC International for this opportunity to make visible what Professor Pavrala and his work described as marginalized knowledges. So thank you so much. I feel really blessed to be here. Today, in just thinking about what to add to the conversation, I picked on a subject that I feel is relevant to both the India community and the Nigerian space. And so today I'll be sharing my thoughts on the need for communication scholarship around the role of women in climate change. I've tagged this Communication Scholarship for Socioeconomic Development. Where are the women in climate change coverage? Well, before I dig even deeper, I wanted to share with us in terms of even celebrating the Manipal Nigeria conversation, to just share some of the things that I find are very relevant to both countries. The first one will be the conversation around poverty. Both countries have been labeled. Can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. Have been labeled the world poverty capitals. And at the same time, both countries have a thing or two to do with respect to corruption. Whereas, for instance, India used about $470 million to conduct their census. Nigeria is asking for 1.8 billion for just a population of under 200 million. And except if you're living under the rock in the last few weeks, you know the conversation between Chef Hilda Bassi and Chef Lata London, two of them doing amazing work in holding the records for the longest cooking hours. These are just a few things that Nigeria, some of the popular conversations when you think about Nigeria and India. But now to the subject, what we want to speak on, which is climate change, just prolonged changes in temperature and weather patterns that are causing so much havoc all around the world. The literature suggests, for instance, that women, when it comes to climate change conversations, climate change affects different genders differently. And I and my team here found it really interesting, some of the things that we found in literature, and we decided to also explore the media space to see how climate change, the representation of women in climate change stories. But just to lay a background, thinking about climate change and gender, women are the forefront of food production all around the world. But at the same time, they own just about 10% of the land. It means, therefore, that when crisis occurs, especially climate-related crisis, women get to suffer the most. And at the same time, thinking about the world statistics around poverty, women are poorer. And the issue is, these things occur not because women are inherently weak, but just because of the structural inequalities. And so this conversation is all about drawing research focus that will think around the intersection between gender inequality and environmental injustice. And for my team, in just thinking about it, we decided to explore one very powerful theoretical framework, which brings me back again to India. A lot about, next slide, please. A lot about this theory, ecofeminism, has a lot to do with historical roots of India, where a lot of men and women have done a lot to protect the environment. I saw, for instance, what Badana Shiva did with her program around the Chippo and Dolan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that okay, but around the 18th century, we saw lots of work being done in India regarding drawing attention between this relationship between gender and environmental injustice or environmental abuse. And we decided to explore this theoretical framework to see how, for instance, the Nigerian media spaces, especially newspapers, how they cover women. Because just last year, we experienced what people have labeled the worst flooding incident. In that flood incident, over 600 persons died, over 3,000 injured. We got loss of farmland, hectares destroyed. And to date, people are still displaced from their homes. So it was important for us to just venture into that to see how the coverage happened. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so our work is just giving an ecofeminist perspective around the coverage of climate change in Nigeria, but we're focusing especially on the flooding that occurred last year, 2022. But what are the few things that we're beginning, which of course drew our attention and this need for more conversations around gender and climate change? The first thing we observed was this gross underrepresentation of women, the near invisibility of women in this story. But when we looked at the images, which is another thing that's really lacking in the literature, analysis around visual analysis or visual conversations is really lacking. But we did in this particular work, and it's still ongoing, by the way. We observed that women, when they were depicted or when they were included in the photographs, they were depicted as victims. And then the third thing that we are beginning to see in terms of looking at the articles was this complete exclusion of women when the conversations around climate change effects is discussed, or stories about the effects of climate change. But remember, I started off by saying women are at the forefront. They have been dealt the short end of the stick when it comes to climate change and all the issues surrounding it. But when it comes to conversations, whether it's around policy, about solution, or even the effects, they are completely excluded. I would like to show you now just a few photos that we're able to extract from some of the articles. If you can go, please go to the next slide. There's this image there of women. I don't know whether you can see it. Can we have it? We'll share it in a bit. Okay, it will be shared in a bit. But some of these images, about 3 of them, will just show just a few of the examples of images that we've been looking at and how women were depicted as opposed to how men were depicted. Why is all of this important? The exclusion of the role of women or the impact of climate change on women will continue to foster marginalized women and contribute to gender inequality. It will also stymie any efforts at real solutions, because it's actually really sad to understand that people who are most affected by a problem do not have the opportunity to share their thoughts about it, especially in the media space, which we know is very instrumental in shaping our public consciousness and solutions and thinking about societal issues. Climate change is a major problem. It affects us socioeconomically. And for instance, the flood is costing Nigeria tons of billions of naira to resolve. And again, who knows what's going to happen in 2023? And I know that the story is the same for India. What we're doing, or what I'm calling for, is more research around the role of women in conversations around climate change, for us to draw and beam the searchlight on how climate change is affecting women, and thereby issues like poverty, insecurity, and others. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I'm grateful.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. That was also a good follow-up to Professor Vinod's presentation. And I'm glad that you have highlighted the issues of climate change with regards to the economic justice that is required for both of our continents, Africa and Asia, to get on productively well, and what we as scholars should do. I imagine that this conversation is going to get even more heated up from here. So I'll leave it to Professor Padma to carry on from Manipal Hub. Thank you.
Yeah, so now we have with us Dr. Nirmal Mani Adhikari. He's from Nepal. And Dr. Nirmal Mani Adhikari is a communication theorist, media researcher, and author. Dr. Adhikari has given us a very Asian model of communication called as Sadharanikaran model of communication. He's currently an associate professor at the Department of Languages and Mass Communication in Kathmandu University, Nepal. He's an author and editor of as many as 60 published books and 75 research articles, and also is a principal researcher or lead researcher of several research projects. Over to you, Professor Nirmal Mani Adhikari.
Thank you. Namaskar. As Professor Padma Rani introduced, I am a communication theorist from Nepal, but currently speaking from Nepal. What I am speaking today is directly related to the very theme of ICA conference, reclaiming authenticity in communication. Okay, before the Sadharanikaran model of communication came, it was the Western scholars utilizing the very Euro-American paradigm to conduct research on communication, but claiming a kind of universalization in order to describe the communication practices of different parts of the world, different cultural locations. So earlier than that, one had to view the very process of communication from the lens of Western communication theory. But with the development of this, we can reclaim authenticity in communication. And then the very theme of this panel session, narratives and counter narratives, utilizing communication scholarship to influence perceptions and realities of socio-economic development. I have added indigenous, the word indigenous there. It's about utilizing indigenous communication scholarship. So all of us know, you may go to the next slide, even next one. So we all know that there existed the dichotomy in the field of communication theory. The East-West dichotomy is a living reality in the context of communication theory, because yeah, people have been practicing communication as for their, let us say, civilization, culture, social practices, and so on. But the communication field, this field has been considering being dominated by Western discursive paradigm since its institutionalization in the academia. It was in the post-Second World War situation in the US that communication was institutionalized, and there was a kind of linear expansion from there. Next. Meanwhile, the endeavors to critique and enrich the field from Eastern or Asian philosophical perspectives started decades ago. Even there is concept of Afrocentricity, there is concept of Asia centricity. In the East-West Center of Hawaii, a conference was organized in 1980 back then, yeah, about Eastern and Western perspectives of communication, having a kind of, let us say, a comparative perspective. So what has happened? The field of communication theory has been witnessing a paradigm shift, thereby promoting multicultural and multidisciplinary theorization of communication. So with this, there is concept of de-Westernization, yeah, which started critiquing the Western discursive paradigm and its one-sided, yeah, or totalizing a tendency to define communication from its own location, but claiming a kind of universality. So after de-Westernization, let us say, so many contributions from Nepal, from India, from Sri Lanka, from China, let us say Japan, and so on. And scholars from the West teaching there, conducting research there, but seeking perspectives from India and China especially. So due to all these contributions, there came another phase, reorientation. Yeah. So, but the final stage is, once you have communication theories from the West, yeah, it was already there, and now people like me contributing communication theories from our own locations. So now you have two different examples, and now you can work on reconciliation of the East and the West to communication theory. So if we see, if you conduct a literature review, you can see the East is visible now. It is not like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Now Western scholars approaching communication from Eastern perspective, you can see a group of scholars like this. Another group of scholars, Eastern scholars working in the Western academia, but approaching communication from Eastern perspective. And the third one, like me, Eastern scholars at the home countries approaching communication from the Eastern perspective. And if you conduct literature review, people like me are being cited enormously. So many people from the West, from other parts of the world, they have been reading and they have been citing. So it makes the East visible. People now, the core concepts like Sadharanikaran, Sahridayata, these are known to people in the USA, let us say in the Australia, in the Africa, in the South Americas, and even in different countries of Asia. They know at least the core concepts, and there is, let us say, this appreciative mood. We shall consider the importance of communication scholarship in the non-Western countries as well. Next, please. So theorization from the East, yeah, by these three groups I mentioned, it's ever increasing, and Eastern contributions to the field of communication theory, yeah, it was dismissive in the preliminary phase, but the people which were associated with their home countries, they were narcissistic, they wanted to do something, and sometimes there was much bigger claim than the contributions. Okay, but now currently there is appreciative evaluation, and many publications. Yeah, maybe sometimes it's just token. Yeah, but it has become a ritual to mention non-Western communication theory as well. At least it opens up. Okay, next. So one example of indigenous theorization is the Sadharanikaran model of communication, for which I'm known. And in fact, Sadharanikaran model of communication, it was originally constructed in 2003, and its representation of communication process from many people would say Hindu, yeah, but due to some let us say genuine reasons, I would like to use the terminology Bharatvarsha. That is, yeah, of Bharatvarsha. Here, not only Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, yeah, and others also. They cohabit here. So it is systematic description in diagrammatic form of a process of attaining mutual understanding, commonness or oneness among people. It illustrates how the communicating parties interact in a system, which is called the process of Sadharanikaran for the attainment of Saridayata, the oneness. Next, please. So this is an example of indigenous theorization. Here, the core concepts, they are taken from our, let us say, ancient texts, from the very civilization, and it has its foundation on the core concept of Saridayata. If you see the word Sadharanikaran, the very concept behind it, and the Saridayata, both are concept, and they have been developed as a construct in the research. You know the very importance of construct to develop models, theories, yeah, and all these. So the construction, please, next, please. So the concept of Saridayata, if you go, Saridayata is composed of two words, Samana and Hridaya. So Samana is same or equal. Sometimes it means harmony, empathy, you may say, like that, or being. And Hridaya is heart or becoming. In our Upanishadic tradition, in fact, heart and mind, they are one. So those who have attained the state of Saridayata, they will be called Saridaya. So Saridaya is the noun, and the quality the Saridayas inherit or develop, that is called Saridayata. So next please. So if we see Samana Hridaya is mentioned in Rig Veda, I have that mantra here. Some of you might have heard Samani va akutihi Samana Hridayani va Samanamastu mano yatha susahasati. So Samana Hridayani, Samana Hridaya. If we let us say join these two words, it becomes Saridaya. And the word Saridaya is actually mentioned in Atharva Veda. It is the first text that actually mentions Saridaya is Atharva Veda. There is Samanasya Sukta, or sometimes it is called Samanjasya Sukta as well. Saridayam Samanasya Movidesam Hinomi Vaha. The mantra goes like that. And Rasa Sutra is very important in this aspect. Though Rasa has been mentioned in Upanishad itself, Taittiriya Upanishad, Rasa Vaisaha, but the actual Rasa Sutra comes in Natya Shastra of Bharata Muni. Next, please. So when we have to discuss about this, the very process of Sadharanikaran, then we have to draw on Vedic texts, and then Natya Shastra, and to some extent Vakyapadiya. So aspects of Saridayata has been one of the major concerns of Sanskrit literary criticism. Many authors, including, you might have heard their name, they are very famous. Kalidasa, Abhinava, Bhavabhuti, and Kuntaka have discussed about Saridaya and Saridayata. But the theory of Sadharanikaran is actually developed by Bhattanayaka in order to explain the Rasa Sutra. It's misconception that Bharata Muni gave the theory of Sadharanikaran. No, he gave that Rasa Sutra, and while explaining how that is possible, Bhattanayaka came with the theory of Sadharanikaran. So next, please. So we have to go to that concept. So what is Saridayata then? it can be considered as social preparedness. And that entails living amongst people, sharing their joys and sorrows, but encompassing the entire humanity within becoming a citizen of the world. I have quoted Dr. Vidyanivas Mishra. So here the core concept is how, next please, how people of different castes, different ethnicity, different language background, all of us know countries like Nepal and India are not like China or previous England or France like this. They were based on single ethnic identity. Yeah, but since time immemorial, we have multicultural setting, multi-ethnic, multilingual setting. So we needed such communication model, such communication theory, which can incorporate all of the diversities together, irrespective of asymmetrical relationship in the society. So how people from one background can communicate with people from other different backgrounds? Please, next. So how people can become that is let us say being able to communicate empathetically with others. It's not common. The role of culture is crucial in this regard. Culture provides the basis for saridata on which an individual has to undergo a natural course of evolution. So the very theme of this panel, yeah, perceptions and realities of socio-economic development, that becomes very relevant. Please go to next slide. So Sarideta is the construct, as I mentioned, it is in the Vedic text, it is in the Natya Shastra tradition, all these things. But we needed to work further on this. You can keep this. I'll go further. So Sarideta is the construct. Now we drew on that very concept and then applied that to the communication context. So that should not be limited to the domain of poetics and aesthetics. If we make that way, that will be an elitist approach. So how people use that very notion of Sarideta in day-to-day communication. So in fact, various research has been conducted. Yeah, how even the complex concepts like Advaita Vedanta, it's very complex concept. Even students or scholars today having higher degrees, they find difficulty to explain Advaita Vedanta. But Shankaracharya, Adi Shankara, and so many other gurus, they made the major themes so popular that we can find the elements of Advaita Vedanta, even folklore. Yeah. So there are so many techniques. I am not going to that. I'm sticking to the major theme. So Sarideta has been used as a construct to analyze how successful communication was possible in such society where there is asymmetry in terms of, let us say, power, in terms of wealth, in terms of varna, in terms of asrama, in terms of, let us say, castes and all these. But the one thing is common, they have been communicating. The successful communication is there. If there would be, let us say, just linear communication approaches, our society could not sustain till now. There are many instances in which people would engage in fights, conflicts, yeah, all these things. But these are minor things. What is major thing? Civilization is thriving here. We have, let's say, thousands of years of history of civilization, and people coexist, people communicate, and you can take example of Kumbh. Yeah, people from Nepal, India, they easily understand that. Millions of people from different backgrounds would gather to one place. Yeah, they don't know each other, they don't understand each other's language. Yeah, even they have different food habits. There is vast difference, but they all understand, they all perform all rituals, and go like that. So how this is possible? This is possible due to the very let us say intuition. It is termed pratibha by Bhartrihari. Yeah, or that feeling, we may say that feeling of Saridayata. So due to the very quality of Saridayata, people can overcome all the differences, and they have been communicating very successfully. And that can be utilized even today, because the function of theory not only describes, it explains, it predicts, and it can be applied for, let us say, in a way, control function. So if we work on this theory, we can develop variables, and that can be applied even today. People can be manipulated in a way, let us say. So to have that quality, Saridayata quality, if we move from how communication is conducted in Bharatvarsha society to how communication shall be, let us say, practiced here, then we can come to this, how we can influence perceptions and realities, and how that can be applied for socio-economic development. For this round, I would like to keep this much. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Professor Nirmal Mani Adhikari, for giving us a good theoretical background and understanding of the Sadharanikaran model of communication. Over to you, Ekta, now.
Okay. Thank you, Prof, for highlighting those issues once again. We appreciate your doing this with us, as always. So we are ready now to listen to the second perspective from Nigeria, and we are going to invite Dr. Jacob Swemo. Dr. Jacob is an alumnus of Benue State University and holds a PhD in mass communication. Dr. Jacob Swemo's research interests is in broadcasting and development communication and emerging media. Dr. Joseph is currently the head of department of mass communication in Nile University of Nigeria, Abuja. Dr. Jacob has three book chapters, and 3 edited works in local, international, and continental publications on communication studies. We are happy to have you, Dr. Jacob, contribute to this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is Dr. Jacob Shagbao Swemo. Like she rightly said, senior lecturer and head, Department of Mass Communication, Nile University of Nigeria, Abuja. Actually, I have 32 peer-reviewed journal publications in both national and international journals, 3 book chapters, 3 edited works, 5 book chapters, 3 edited works, and 3 book titles. Okay, thank you. I have listened to the presentations carefully. The chair of the Municipal Hub did an elaborate introduction. The first speaker, the professor, also did justice to very interesting thoughts there on utilizing communication research to influence perceptions, socio-economic realities. The chair's background was quite incisive. The first panelist emphasis on tangible indicators is quite appreciated. The second speaker from the hub that took a thorough theoretical perspective and approach is quite appreciated. I appreciate you. Mine will be more or less like an assessment of what we've done in this regard and how probably a strategy of some thoughts on how to reposition and refocus communication research in a manner that retains its relevance and emphasis, particularly to stimulate social economic development. And so Communication research undertakes the scientific study of communication processes, like rightfully situated by the previous speakers. Being scientific, is objective and is deterministic. It is interdisciplinary in nature, and it borrows heavily both in terms of theory, like rightly presented by the previous speaker, and methods from the social sciences and other sciences, as the case may be. Perceptions, for the purpose of this interaction, we look at it or conceive it in the context of the process through which the information from the outside environment is selected, received, organized, and interpreted to make it meaningful to you. This input of meaningful information results in decisions and indecisions. This was borrowed from the thoughts of Diksha Kashia. Now, around reality, reality is the sum of the aggregate of all that is real or existent within a system, or exposed to that which is only imaginary, non-existent, or non-factual. The term is also used to refer to the ontological status of things, indicating their existence in physical terms, reality, or the totality of a system, known or unknown. Now, socioeconomic development, like the chair of the Municipal Hub emphasized, seeks to identify both the socio and economic needs within a community and create strategies that will address those needs in ways that are practical in the best interests of the community over a long time. Now, indicators of social economic development. Socioeconomic development is measured with indicators such as GDP, life expectancy, literacy, levels of employment, personal safety, freedom of association, and participation in civil society are also considered among other powerful indicators. Now, the goal of social economic development is to improve a people's lifestyles, improve education, improve earnings or incomes, propel skills development, enhance employment profile of a target social system. It seeks to identify social and economic needs within a community and create strategies to address those needs in ways that are practical and in the best interests of the community over the long run. Social economic development also considers the availability of essential services within an area. Now, how do we apply communication research? I believe that, having observed the thoughts, I've read the works of the previous speakers from the Municipal Hub. They have interesting contributions on the topics that they articulated right here at the discussion. However, a careful observation of this would present some of these realities. There is a strong one for reorientation for scholars of communication. We need some form of a reorientation as communication scholars to be able to focus communication research in a manner that explicitly addresses some of these core development concerns, especially among developing nations of the world that are faced with very severe economic needs and concerns, so to say. Now, we need to slightly begin to engage conversations around the area of shifting emphasis on publication merely for the purposes of promotion in our universities, to begin to shift the emphasis of publication for impact. And so we must begin to interrogate these concepts of shifting emphasis on publication for promotion to publication for impact. And impact now have to do with the influence, the effect of our intellectual contributions on the livelihood of the people or the environment within which we are domiciled. Now, we must also press on for proper legislation compelling public officers to utilize the recommendations from scholarly submissions. It appears that largely careful and empirical protocols are articulated to interrogate concepts, interrogate communication issues, arrive at very interesting and constructive recommendations at that. And those recommendations are more or less touched in some of those search engines and in some books, so to say, and those recommendations are not actually utilized. I think we should begin to galvanize support around the area of pressing for legislations that compare or articulate and amplify the need, the essence for utilizing these recommendations, so to say. Now, we should also begin to think about sliding from emphasis on mere mass-mediated problems to explorations on development communication models, like the previous speaker was emphasizing on theories and the theoretical approach to some of these development issues. It is important that emphasis be carefully focused in the area of exploring development communication models thoroughly and applying them, so to say, with a view to ameliorating some of these development concerns. And then the issue of visibility has been overemphasized, but it's important to also talk about it again. We must improve on visibility of communication research across the platforms and within the region. Now, we should try to see how we can press for the relaxation or probably the amelioration or perhaps the absolute removal, if we get proper sponsorship for these communication researchers, removal of restrictions on access to communication research. Because authors are rarely remunerated. So why the dollar fines on access to these papers? That restricts access to this content. A lot of content is there, processed, uploaded, made available. We should begin to talk about probably relaxing or reducing the emphasis on the dollar sign that restricts access to some of these publications. And then our researches, communication researches, the application should focus specifically on core aspects of development, like in the health sector, health, agriculture, the economy, education, morality, insecurity, poverty, corruption, international trade policies and wars. Our research emphasis should envelope these concepts that have direct impact and bearing on the people in the environment within which we are domiciled. If our communication emphasis is focused on these issues, interrogating them properly and articulating proper recommendations to the effect of enhancing the standard of living of the people across these regions, it will make a lot of impact. And an emphasis, our emphasis should be shifted to matters of public affairs journalism, agenda setting models, development communication, principally, where the Akada model as emphasized by some scholars, and then particularly as it relates to development or developing nations applies. And then a coordinated approach towards interrogating public policy. I think we require such approach. The public policy as it borders on issues of development is very important because we are the public's advocates, and it is important that we advance a properly coordinated approach towards interrogating public policy. Then proposing constructive approaches to communication in a manner that carves a path for development. That is the deliberate or the purposeful application of communication for development purposes. Should be emphasized probably across the academic platforms as we interface with students across levels, undergraduate levels and postgraduate levels. We should begin to emphasize constructive approaches to communication in a manner that carves a path for development explicitly. And then guiding key development actors across diversities to prepare development. This instructive will guide them, and the guidance comes from the content of the communication researches that we execute and make available. So as it relates to the issue of health, there is a proposal guiding it. As it relates to the issue of agric, the economy, education, morality, insecurity, poverty, corruption, international trade, and issues of war. As it relates to these issues, communication researchers do not exist in isolation of society. We're part of society, and we are most times, most instances, experiencing some of this, the impact around these areas. Focusing communication efforts along these areas in a manner that emphasizes clearly and explicitly what's to be done. That is the constructive approach, so as to guide development actors or public office holders, so as to be able to ultimately prepare development will not be out of place. I've been fast because I know that we're far probably behind schedule, and it's important we meet up with time. So the last thoughts that I have to share, probably to lend my voice to the conversation, is on the areas for subsequent focus of communication research. I think we will need further engagements around the areas of visibility. How do we enhance the visibility of these studies, and how do we play around the issue of culture in a manner that retains the global, perhaps global relevance of the problems so investigated. And then the issues of diversities. The previous speaker attempted to emphasize on some of these issues. Universal approaches in meaning, and then the problems investigated, the ultimate nature of the perception, the global perception of the local issues so investigated. We need to look around some of these issues. A fact may be, an issue may be local. It doesn't de-emphasize the enormity or significance of that for a target social system. When you interrogate an issue, for instance, that perhaps is termed local, and then but has some elements of genuine concern, and interrogate some genuine, because all nationalities are not at the same pace development-wise. And there are some concerns that are peculiar to a people, but compared to the other people on the other side of the divide. It is important we look around, we look on these issues of diversities and come up with strategies in approach that will give it a scope that is more or less accommodated globally. And then the issue of the universality of the designs, research designs adopted and the methods applied. We need to interrogate some of these issues and subsequent engagements and come up with perhaps some form of a resolution or a recommendation, so to say. And then purposeful platforms. We need to create some of these platforms. Probably the Nigerian Hub, the Super Hub, and a few other hubs could come up with a platform that come up with certain titles that will secure some form of index around major platforms, so as to try to give visibility to these efforts. I'm looking forward to collaborations with this hub beyond just this interaction, but more intellectually engaging and mutually beneficial engagements around the subjects emphasized. And then elimination of colonial orientation of worthlessness. We must address the issue of this colonial orientation. There's this understanding that perhaps anything local is local and shouldn't be dragged into international discourses along certain themes and subjects, as the case may be. But who determines, what are the factors that determine the worth of an intellectual effort, for instance? Or what are the factors responsible for determining the quality of an intellectual submission, for instance? These are some of the engagements that we need to really foster to be able to carve a niche for, and then retain our dignity, relevance as nationalities in the committee of scholarship. And then the issue of unhealthy rivalry also should be addressed. These are some of the issues that, if not properly addressed, have significant implications on the application of communication for development, for instance. And then destructive criticism, we need to address some of those things. So yeah, at the moment, I think I'll leave it here. I hope I've said a few things that would inspire some further expressions and submissions across the hubs and scholars on the platform so presented. Thank you very much, the Nigerian Hub Chair. I think that I'll leave it here and allow you to take it from there. Thank you.
Please, have you muted it? Thank you so much, Dr. Swemo. We are happy to have heard all of the interventions that you made in the conversations, the conversation about narratives and counter narratives. And you really have brought some very insightful points into the conversation. I was intrigued when you talked about collaboration, because this is really why we are here. We're very delighted to have had this opportunity to do this with Manipal Hub and the very eminent scholars with them. And we know that we are not going to end it here. The collaborations will definitely continue. So that communication scholarships from both end of the woods will make impact for our countries, for our continent, and for the world. So please, that point about collaboration, I hope that you keep hammering on it as we continue our relationship with our friends from Manipal Hub. Thank you so much. I'll leave it now to Professor Padma to get on with things from Manipal.
Now we have with us Dr. Pradeep Nair. He's the Professor of New Media in the Department of New Media and Director Research of the University at Central University of Himachal Pradesh, Shimla. Previously, he was the Dean of the School of Journalism, Mass Communication in New Media from 2015 to 2022. He was also the head of the New Media from 2012 to 2022. His research and teaching is in the field of critical communication theories, new media in shaping public opinion and behavior in the context of state-society nexus, exploring the relationship between local media and climate change, understanding the impact of climate change on local ecologies, and health communication and governance. Over to you, Dr. Pradeep Nair.
Thank you, Padmaji. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes. Yes, you're audible. Please go on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be part of this wonderful conversation. I just want to take, it is always a pleasure to listen to Professor Paudala, and I just want to take those understandings further. Recently, we did a study, and all in, my brief discussion is all based on that study only. And this is because it's a narrative and counter narrative. And this is something which the Nigerian counterparts, they have discussed about, climate change and how, the climate change is reported. It's a small town, Dharamsala is a small hill town and climatically, very active, very, very active, because we have, a lot of rain, landslide, it's a seismic zone. So a lot of, earthquake, and other issues also, and quite unpredictable weather, What we did last year, we did a study and tried to look at how local media they report, climate change stories, especially the stories of landslide, because landslide, it's a major concern here. And we got some very, interesting, observations from that study. We conducted this study on some 5-6 local Hindi newspapers, which were quite popular here, and they have a good circulation in comparison, to the English newspaper Tribune, which is more, a Punjab-oriented newspaper and having their edition here in Himachal. And what we observed is that the reporting of climate change is so poor, I can't tell you. There is hardly 10% science in those stories. And after that, we have, thematically analyzed some 150 stories published in these, 5 Hindi newspapers, local newspapers. And after that, we started, interacting with the local journalists, with the news editors, with the newsroom people. And what we came to know that these journalists, actually, they are not trained journalists. They are the people who are interested in journalism, and they just get into the profession. But most of them, they are not. You can say they are hardworking people. It is not like that they are not interested in reporting, or they don't believe in good reporting. They don't want to do good stories. But unfortunately, they lack training. They don't have an understanding of the issue itself. They don't have a concern about it. And then we started, with the help of, other institutions, with Earth Journalism Network, we started, conducting some small workshops for them. And after those workshops, we have started, again, analyzing the story, which these journalists have started writing after attending those workshops. And I can tell you, there is a 20 to 30% improvement. I'm not saying 100% improvement. It is not that suddenly after the workshop, all of them, they have started, writing sophisticated, high-profile stories. But yes, they have started, at least they come to know whom to contact. Earlier, what happens if it's a landslide, news, they, rather than, consulting a geologist, they basically go and talk to a teacher who teaches geography in some school. And they think that, okay, and their understanding is that the geography and the geology both are same. So at least after, providing this kind of training support, we have noticed that these journalists, they have, and then some of the stories, they also got appreciation. Some of the senior journalists, some other people, they started, saying that now the story has improved, some. So that is what, I 100% I believe what Paurala sir has said, that we must, rather than getting into more sophisticated, theoretical understanding of the issues of communication and social change, it is a time to try to look into the small narrative, the small, kind of things which are happening, especially in local level. I always, what our understanding is that, if especially, related to the climate change stories, that these stories are very well reported in big newspapers because of their sophisticated newsroom and the journalists, the kind of journalists they have, and the understanding of the journalist itself. But actually, it is the local newspaper which plays an important role, because in a small hill town like Dharamsala, where you will find the Tibetan exile settlement also, where you will have the native Himachalis also, these small newspapers, they have a role, and they can play a much better role. So what we realized is that rather than just getting into this, doing research or just teaching the students and getting more and more into academic things, it is also a time for the journalism school, especially in this part of the country. We have at least two universities. One is the Central University, where we have a full-fledged journalism school, and then there is HPU in Simla, where they also have a journalism department. So now we have started coming together, and having more and more interaction with the local journalists, trying to conduct more workshops for them, and trying to convince the the news editors, the newspaper editors, that allow them to attend these workshops, because these workshops are going to be very useful for them as they are learning skills of writing, and it is improving the way they report climate change stories. And this is a very different kind of learning for all of us. So that is what I would like to share on this platform, that it is a time for many of us to look into small places, because it is not about the people who are growing in and around the technology, because they know how to use the technology. Because they are growing in a world like that. But then there is another world where people, they have no idea how to use technology. But these people are also quite capable. They are capable people. They have abilities. And if we talk about an inclusive world, if we talk about, that the technology is going to bridge the class divide, or the technology is going to bridge, the information gap, then really we have to look into the small places where people have a very different kind of struggle. And these people, the struggle is that they have no idea how to create, relevant information, what to share, and how to get connected. They are sharing, no doubt, but all gossips only. But once they learn how to share and how to exchange useful information, maybe this exchange of useful information is going to bring a more productive world for them. So I hope that since and in many ways we are also similar to Nigeria, because we are also a middle income country having a lot of struggle, a huge country having multiple divides. So it is a good time for both the country, Nigeria and India, to learn from small communities, learn from small places where there is still a struggle is going on. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak at this platform. And I hope that this collaboration and ICA and Manipal will try to look into how the experience of both countries, especially the experience of communication scholars and the way communication is get engaged with social, economic, and cultural change. Maybe this exchange of information is going to take us to the next level. Thank you so much.
I can't hear you, Professor Padma. I thought you were saying something, but we can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, now. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Pradeep Nair, for your views on climate change, and especially your focus on a particular area, Dharamshala, which, just for the knowledge of the audience, I would like to inform that Dharamshala is a small town in Himachal Pradesh, on the Himalayas of India, where the Tibetan community in exile, their government with Dalai Lama is stationed there, and also they interact with the local communities there, and they've been in India for over 40 years now. With that, we move on to ICA Nigeria for our last speaker, and after that, we'll have some discussion.
Okay, thank you, Professor Padma. And thank you for Professor Pradeep. I'm sorry if I didn't get that right, but thank you for your presentation. We did enjoy it from Nigeria. So we're going to move on straight to the next speaker from Nigeria for this round. I believe after this round, we're going to have some interactions going on before the speakers come on. We saved the best for last, if I may say so, but we are happy to invite Mrs. Toby Oyedele. Mrs. Oyedele is a PhD candidate in the University of Port Harcourt, whose main areas of research is in development communication, especially at the intersection of agric development and women and children's development. She is going to speak more about herself, if need be, but especially about the subject of narratives and counter-narratives as it relates to all of the factors that we need for development in our different regions. Mrs. Toby, are you there? So I'll yield the floor for you now.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I stand on existing protocol. It's really a great honor to be on this panel. I think this is a very important conversation to have. And really the heaviest burden that we carry is the weight of our expectations. I will be speaking on harnessing indigenous communication scholarship for inclusive development. And I'll be focusing more on overcoming these challenges and unlocking opportunities in Nigeria and India. Of course, I'll be drawing on the premise that these countries, Nigeria and India, struggle with providing necessities, governance-related issues, and rising poverty rates. I will also explore how communication scholars can utilize networks and platforms such as those provided by the ICA to achieve personal development goals and contribute to societal growth. We already know that Nigeria and India are classified by the World Bank as lower middle income countries, and they face significant challenges in the pursuit of socioeconomic development. These challenges include inadequate provision of basic necessities, such as clean water, food, governance-related problems, like corruption and rising rates of poverty, like some of the previous speakers have said. Now, the complex nature of these challenges calls for innovative approaches that go beyond the conventional development strategies. Indigenous communication scholarship presents a unique opportunity to influence perceptions and realities of socioeconomic development in these countries. Now, what really is the problem? The central problem that has arisen over the years is the underutilization of indigenous communication scholarship and practices in shaping the perceptions, the realities, and socioeconomic development. This in turn hinders the empowerment and inclusion of marginalized communities and inhibits the creation of more culturally sensitive and contextually appropriate development interventions. And so by addressing this problem, we will be able to explore the opportunities for leveraging indigenous communication scholarship and to influence socioeconomic development outcomes and foster a more equitable and inclusive society. I actually went and started a case study, and I came up with a few objectives, which would help to leverage the indigenous communication scholarship to influence perceptions and realities of socioeconomic development in Nigeria. And some of those objectives were to examine the relevance and significance of indigenous communication scholarship in addressing the unique challenges faced by lower middle income countries like Nigeria and India. And then another was to explore the potential of indigenous communication approaches in shaping perceptions and challenging dominant narratives that hinder development in Nigeria and India as well. Another was to investigate the role of communication networks such as the ICA, and then of course to identify opportunities for collaboration, knowledge exchange, professional growth, which is offered by communication networks and platforms to better contribute to the growth of society and spur economic and social development in Nigeria and India. Influencing perceptions is crucial as it shapes attitudes, it shapes beliefs and behaviors of individuals and communities towards development initiatives. So by utilizing indigenous communication scholarship, communication scholars can change the dominant narratives, counter the stereotypes, and promote alternative perspectives. And this in turn again will lead to accurate understanding of the social economic realities in Nigeria and India as well, and fostering inclusive development and addressing misconceptions that hinder progress. It's imperative to note at this point that the academic study and exploration of communication practices, processes, and systems within the indigenous communities is very important. It focuses on understanding and analyzing excuse me, the unique communication patterns, traditions, and cultural contexts of the indigenous peoples. And it is characterized by cultural respect and sensitivity, as well as decolonization and empowerment and community-centered approach. Now, what really is the role of communication scholars in personal development? I mean, we're talking about underutilizing these networks and underutilizing what we have. The role, there are three basic roles. One is mentoring and guidance, skill and development, and the last, networking and connections. Now, I mentioned before that there was a case study, and this case study was on community radio and grassroots mobilization in rural Nigeria. I chose Western Nigeria and looked at 4 community radio stations: the Agility FM 92.1, the Amuludun FM, the Shaki FM, that is JFM, and then the Gravity FM, which was in Boho. They were all in very close proximity to themselves. And there was quite some information concerning them, you know. Now, this study was actually to examine the role of community radio in facilitating grassroots mobilization in rural Nigeria. We're still talking about the utilization of our networks. And, you know, Nigeria is a country with significant rural population. It faces numerous challenges in terms of limited access to information, poor infrastructure, and marginalization of rural communities. So in this context, community radio stations have emerged as a powerful tool for empowering rural communities and promoting local voices and addressing development issues. And we were able to identify that, yes, they would empower local voices. They would aim to create more information dissemination, create education and awareness, and bring more social mobilization and development initiatives, as well as cultural preservation and promotion. For that study, I was able to use the cultural hegemony theory, which highlights the power of dynamics embedded within communication processes and influences the dominant narratives on perceptions of socio-economic development. Now, it recognizes that communication can be used to challenge and disrupt the dominant hegemonic discourse and create space for alternative perspectives and the voices. Of course, it aligns with the study as it recognizes the importance of counter-dominant narratives and creating opportunities for marginalized communities to shape the discourse and narratives of their own development. I used the case study employed the qualitative research approach, including the in-depth interviews with key stakeholders and participant observation and content analysis of radio programs. It was conducted in collaboration with the community members, ensuring their active participation and the ownership of this study. And so this implies that when you draw the rural people in, what happens is that they take ownership of that communication process. And so far, we have been able to recommend that we'll embrace cultural sensitivity and contextual understanding, engaging with local communities and stakeholders, fostering partnerships and collaborations, investing in research and evaluation, and advocating for policy change and support. So what is the implication of this for communication scholars? The implications are not far-fetched. The first one is cultural responsiveness. Another is community engagement. Then we have collaboration and partnership, and then research and evaluation, and of course, policy advocacy. I'll be speaking more on this maybe when we come back. And of course, there is a call to action for all of us, that we as scholars and practitioners in the field of communication should recognize the transformative power of indigenous communication. Professor Contractor, I think that was yesterday, he said something. He said, we are the enablers of our communication, of our connections. And so if we recognize that transformative power of indigenous communication scholarship in shaping perceptions and realities of socioeconomic development, we will be able to strive to create more inclusive, equitable, and a sustainable world. We call for a concerted effort to leverage indigenous communication scholarship in our research, in our practice, in our advocacy, and together we can harness the potential of indigenous knowledge systems, cultural sensitivity, and community engagement to drive meaningful change and contribute to sustainable development. Thank you.
I hope you could hear the clap coming from our hub down here. Maybe we need to clap again. Thank you so much. Thank you for a beautiful wrap of the first round. If I might put also into perspective the first speaker, Dr. Sarah Jo, the second speaker, Dr. Jacob Suemo, and then now you, I could see that in terms of meeting the demands of our subject of our theme for discussion today, which is narratives and counter narratives, Dr. Jo talked about climate change and the need to include women, especially, and all vulnerable populations in the discussions around climate change by communication scholars for our continent. Dr. Jacob emphasized on best practices in scholarship, in communication scholarship, that will enhance the work that we do, including making sure that we have excellent work and then ensuring that collaborations exist so that the conversations continue within the walls of scholarship, and then we take it out to the knowledge arena all across the world. And now Mrs. Toby has given us a call to action to utilize indigenous communication scholarship to create networks, improve on, what to change the narrative. So what's a counter narrative? It's a narrative that takes the place of an already existing narrative. And the already existing narrative is that both our countries and continents are developing. We do not have the necessities that we allow ourselves, our populations, to compete with other countries of the world at the moment in terms of economic, in terms of social, and in terms of other amenities that will let us live the best lives that we should, socioeconomically and otherwise. That's the narrative. What's the counter narrative that we're pushing by all of these speakers now? It is that Africa and Asia, and Nigeria and India can actually not just be perceived as we are now, or even the realities can change if, as communication scholars, we contribute our quota to ensuring that we replace the narrative of underdeveloped with the narrative of marching towards being among the most developed countries of the world. We have listened to you speakers and we have heard you very well. I know that I am not the only one who heard you. I will allow Professor Padma to also do a brief recap and then begin with the interactions from the audience from Manipal. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the speakers from the ICA Nigeria Hub, Port Harcourt. Here, from the ICA Manipal Hub, we had Professor Pavrala, our first speaker, who highlighted about the intangible outcomes when we talk about communication for social development, we need to, focus on the intangible outcomes also, and not always, emphasize on the tangible outcomes or, critiqued the evaluation matrix. Moving on to Professor Nirmal Adhikari, who gave us a theoretical view of, how we should have our communication scholarship from our own indigenous knowledge, especially the ancient text. His theory comes from, the source for this theory is from our own indigenous ancient text that he emphasized upon. And this is very much to do with our own cultural understandings, the nuances of our culture and things. And the third speaker, Professor Pradeep Nair, he emphasized on how climate change is a very issue which needs to be addressed. And it is very much there. It is no longer an issue that we are talking about. We are all facing it across the world. And there is a lack of dearth of reporting about these issues in the right manner, in the scientific manner, and how this can be improved upon by training of journalists and by focusing on hyper local issues, because every community faces its own set of problems. We cannot have the same set of standards put across or imposed upon communities. What model can work in a particular area need not work in another area. And we need to understand that some of these development issues need to be addressed from a hyper local perspective. I think I'll wind up at this. And any questions from the audience? The audience in Manipal, you can switch on your video and audio and ask questions from there. Okay, till people think of some questions, let's have listen to Professor Vinod Pavrala so that maybe you can spark some questions out of it.
Yeah, just to spark off some conversation. I think having listened to all the speakers, I'm trying to make some common cause with what I had to say and what some of you said. For example, Dr. Toby Hoydele's presentation about indigenous communication, foregrounding marginalized knowledges and all had a lot of resonance with what I had to say. And similarly, Dr. Sarah's presentation about gender and climate change, the need to listen to women's voices in climate change. Dr. Pradeep Nair's idea of taking into account local narratives on issues of climate change. I mean, all of these have something similar and common. Having said that, I also want us to problematize something being attempted by our colleague, Dr. Adhikari. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the kind of effort that he has made over the years about, conceptualizing this theoretical model. The one thing I'm asking all of us to do is, I think we need to problematize what we mean by indigenous knowledge, what we mean by decolonization and decolonized knowledge. Decolonization need not necessarily mean recolonization. You know what I mean? I mean, if we are decolonizing from the West, the East is not a homogeneous entity. There are deep divisions, differences, and plurality in this large entity we are calling the East or the global South. Or even if we talk about a country like India, when I'm suggesting that we need to argue against hegemonic epistemologies in favor of a plurality of knowledge, right? It's not just Western, non-Western. It's not just American and Indian, right? I mean, so what exactly is Indian? You know, whose knowledge are we talking about when the society is deeply hierarchical, class, caste, gender, inequities? I think we need to talk about whose voices are we bringing in this alternative epistemology. And I'm suggesting, like many other scholars, that there cannot be social justice without cognitive justice, right? So social emancipation lies in giving value, according value to these multiple perspectives within our societies, right? So I'm sure Dr. Adhikari will have a response to that, but an indigenous model of communication that is based on a certain nativist interpretation of one's culture, which is very textualist, based on a certain ancient religious text and so on, does it really represent the, you know, lived experiences of the marginalized people? And I'm saying these alternative epistemologies should be based on the lived experiences of people, you know, of the most marginalized, the most voiceless, and so on. And that's the reason I think what Dr. Oedele had to say had a resonance in what I was saying. Yeah, so this is just to problematize some of this conversation that we had. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor. I would like to give an example. Okay, we had to start from where we could start. Okay, that is why we started from the very established concept, the Sadharanikaran, and based on that we could come up with a theory. But there could be not only one theory. There shall be so many theories and models of communication, even within India, even within Nepal. So when we started our Masters in Media Studies program, yeah, we had specifically 3 courses from theory side. One, communication and media theories. Okay. Second, communication traditions in Nepal and Asia. Okay, if it would have been in India, it would be communication traditions in India and Asia, like that. And another, philosophy and communication. Let us take example of communication traditions of Nepal and Asia. In that course, we have covered an ethnic group called Gandharva. Gandharva, who are Gandharvas? They are considered untouchables. They make their livelihood by playing some instruments and singing. And in addition to that, what they used to do, they used to tell people about current happenings. Yeah, centuries ago, when there were no newspapers, no radios, no televisions, how people would know what is happening, let us say, another part of the country. So these people would make would sing events. Yeah, it is called Ghatana. I am translating that. So they would tell people about the current happenings through songs. Yeah, playing their instruments. So we have included a section in this course where we would gather information about that. Some publications are there that also will be included. But our students and faculties, they would conduct field research about those marginalized groups. Yeah. Likewise, there is a tradition called Katual. That means certain person being entitled to transmit information about, let us say, some social gathering or like that. Yeah. What would he do? So he would make a louder voice, sometimes using some instrument to draw attention of the people, and then just pass the notice. Yeah. So they are also not in the very upper hierarchy of the society. They make their livelihood with meager incomes. Yeah. Now, one part of that course is to investigate, to conduct research on those people. Likewise, so political communication in Nepal during Anglo-Nepal War. You might have heard Nepal fought against even British Empire, even Chinese Empire, and it survived. Yeah, at that time, so many countries they lost their independence. But in case of Nepal, we don't have any Independence Day. Why? Because we were never colonized by others. We were always free. But to have that freedom, Nepal had to struggle a lot. And while making that struggle successful, it has very unique, let us say, political communication strategy. And not the elite people worked for that. Who worked for that? Like Gandharvas, like Patuas, like sannyasis, yeah, monks, all these things. So while preparing that course, we thought of including the most, let us say, marginalized, even those were oppressed, untouchable people in the society, but they worked for the betterment of the society from the perspective of communication as well. So this is just an example. So we are not limiting ourselves to ancient texts. Yeah, at some time the text might have been accessed by very few people, but how those texts were practiced, and not only those texts, the various communities, as per the need of the society at that time, they developed some communication strategy. So I think Sadharanikan model of communication is significant in the sense it established that indigenous communication scholarship is in fact possible. Yeah, not only it is not only a matter of discourse, yeah, and let us say complaining that the West has only dominated all these things. So it moved ahead. Yeah, except just not limiting to complaints. It showed that there can be a communication model fully developed, even that would qualify in terms of Western rigors, yeah, all these things. And now we can work further. So taking this as an example and furthering others, now we have widened the field. We have come to the let us say practical aspects of indigenous communication scholarship, and we can do further. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Ekta.
Please
There are
mute
some
your
questions in the chat. There's some questions in the chat box. We can take that.
All right, thank you. Oh. Can I go on, Professor Padman?
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So a couple people have indicated interest to ask questions. I'll call on one of the hub here. Obed, please.
Okay.
It's your video on because I want to. Oh yeah. Cool.
Good afternoon, good day, everyone. My name is Obed Hilsham. So my question is, it's very, very easy when we're talking about hegemonic narratives to fall into a type of dualistic blueprint utopianism, sort of. And we could sort of replace one oppressive system, one dominant hegemonic system with another. For instance, we have what is going on now with Netflix and the whole Afrocentric movement that has sought to portray Cleopatra as a Black woman. And we see all that is going on there. So my question is, how do we ensure that we don't fall into this binary trap, first of all, and we don't fall into this cycle, and also we ensure that marginalized groups and people don't fall through the cracks? And because we tend to marginalize stories that are not ours, first of all, and also those stories that do not exactly scream from the margins. We also tend to, but they are still in the margins, but they are not screaming out very loud. We also tend to marginalize them. So how do we ensure that all this does not happen?
Please mute. Thank you. Thank you. I hope, oh, I'm sorry. I hope you were able to hear the question from Manipal. So yeah, so how do we more inclusivity and ensure that people are not driven to the margins and allowed to stay there, right? Right? Is that it?
Yes.
So how do we make this more inclusive and less binary? Understanding that society is complex and peoples are complex and different in terms of what the narratives and the counter narrative should be. Thank you, Obed. We have another person who wants to make a comment.
Professor Pavra,
Ogaraku, please, can you put on your video so I can highlight you? You ask the question, and then we allow the panelists from starting with Dr. Sarah and then Dr. Jacob as well to give their answers. Henry, please. I'm waiting for you to put your video on and then on.
Okay, my video is on. I don't know if you people can see me. Am I audible enough, sir? Please.
Yes,
can you see?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. It's quite an interesting engagement, and I'm happy. I'm joining from the UK. I really appreciate all the contributions being made, and especially from the community, the communication community through their scholarship. You guys are doing quite great. But listening to the insights from all the presentations, all the professors, the panels, the chair, the co-host, Dr. Kaite George, and the rest, I am quite excited to be part of this. But looking at the insights coming from the works presented, like that of Dr. Toby from Nigeria and the other doctor talking about inclusion of women in climate and other. But my worry is, how do we make these emerging narratives more implementable by involving policymakers in all these new narratives? How do we involve them? I am not quite comfortable with carrying out researches that at the end of the day, they are not reflected in the policies that are being put out there by the government. So how do we involve them more? How do we make our research findings to be quite visible, not only in the communities where they are being intended to be implemented, but also in the consciousness of those who are part of the policymakers? Thank you very much. My name is Henry Ogara.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. I want to, before I proceed, say that we crave the indulgence of our participants and attendees to allow us to take a few more minutes into the next hour. I think we've exceeded 2 hours, 5 minutes. And if you ask me, I think I'm still enjoying this conversation happening here. Please allow us to take just a little bit more of your time so that some of these issues that we raised can be addressed. I'll leave it to Dr. Sarah to begin, and if Dr. Jacob and Toby want to, they will let me know and then cue them in. Thank you.
Awesome. So Obed, I'll say this. I think with respect to the margins and the kind of distance between two extremes, I'll say right now is so wide. And therefore, in my case, in terms of what I presented, there's a great need to talk more about women. Because reading through, for instance, Professor Pavarala's work, I saw that he talked a lot about the intangible. It would seem that in the Nigerian context, the contribution of women are labeled just intangible. There's no way to measure it. But we have to find a way to bring those conversations in. And then just when we have done that, when we've brought women on the table, then we can begin to strive for balance. As you're aware, I think the conversation between women and climate change has shifted a bit from just being women to gender. That way, everyone is included. So I think it's more about balance. And then in more practical terms, is also to shift the focus from just doing a little bit of positivism in terms of quantitative analysis to more of mixed methods. That way, we're also able to create balance in the context of our work. And then to the other person who asked questions about getting into spaces, I think with respect to policy, we need to get into those spaces. I say, and I'll keep making the argument, and there's literature to back this up, that there's a role that the media plays and is so powerful in terms of shaping our consciousness. But I think that there's limitation in terms of the amount or the level of voice from the academic sector in the media space, because that's where everyone converges. If we're able to do our research and then market it and talk about it in the biggest platforms in the world, there's no way that most of those things will not be incorporated in policy. I just think that we are not enough in those spaces. We need to do more. I'll give you a classic example. When the flooding incident happened last year, 2022, what we did in Ellen Hub, where I serve as the team lead, was to bring some experts, people who had done work in the academic sector, to talk about flooding, giving their own perspective. And just by having that conversation, we're able, within my own space in Port Harcourt, to shift the conversation in terms of the blame game from saying, oh, it's the excess water released from Lagdo Dam, to people understanding the place of climate change in torrential rainfalls in River State and other parts of the world. So I think we need to market our research. The whole idea of us doing our work and allowing them to be buried in journals, it doesn't make any sense. We need to go into the space, whether it's via social media or traditional platforms, when we're invited to go there boldly and defend what we've talked about. And then, of course, the government will listen. That's my position on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Let me check now if Dr. Suemo wants to.
Okay, yeah, you wouldn't be too far away from what it's already been articulated clearly by the very previous speaker, who is so beautifully dressed and seated very close to the Nigerian chair. So the thoughts expressed from or by the people, the student, I suppose that was a student who was talking about the divergence. Yeah, good. Now, we are working. I would like to, on a private platform, disagree with the previous speaker on the serious emphasis on women, but that's a very long conversation, or when you talk about women representation. I like to talk about the particular isolating women to emphasize on them that passionately is an issue that we will talk about at a different platform. But yes, if from the thoughts of what I shared earlier, I was trying to talk about the issue of the visibility of this scholarship. If we are so particular about the application of communication research to addressing core development concerns, then the narratives around the integration of recommendations resulting from communication research being infused into policy, issues of public policy, and then engaging or conscientizing those in government to prioritize and apply the research recommendations, so to say, is something really critical. And then like rightly emphasized earlier, emerging media. Powerfully, when you integrate emerging media, there are various case studies. I didn't think of my presentation in terms of a clearly empirical presentation. I felt it was scholars navigating, trying to put their thoughts together around how to refocus communication research in the application of this research in a manner that attracts development. That is why the presentation was more or less focused on my thoughts around this theme, not empirical, because I felt that we are just trying to navigate and seeing how we will collectively refocus our communication approaches by way of coming up with a position on how to apply communication research to specifically attract development, so to say. So yeah, that's the idea. We will begin, we will create the emphasis, and the advocacies will continue to the effect of bringing on board policymakers. We will continue to interrogate government policies in the focus, in the theme and the emphasis of our conferences and our gatherings. And these manifestos will be harvested and made public along all our media platforms, so that whether they like it or yes, they must be brought into the discussion because development is key. It's a priority. We must begin to slightly, my own concern is that so much emphasis has been anchored on these theories, classwork. Society needs to begin to feel the impact, the practical impact and effect of scholarship applied as it addresses on issues of health, agriculture, the environment, environmental communication, political communication, as we so say. And so that is it. I suspect a disconnection from our research focus, and then the people for whom this research focus is meant to, to be helping. There is a disconnection because you observe that a lot is going on. A lot of empirical efforts are going on. A lot of researches are going on and being carried out by well-renowned global scholars, like my friends from the Municipal Hub have so articulated, and their research profile so reflects. But to what extent is this research profile or impact or impacting the community? All right. To what extent is this addressing specific development concerns? I think that's where the conversation is tilting. If we are talking about applying communication research to bring about socioeconomic development, then I feel that we should begin to talk about engage more and how to make this content visible, all right, to the people who are the policymakers. And then the focus of this communication research also has to be refocused. These are my thoughts, so to say. And I'm looking forward to very incisive responses from the Municipal Hub participants, so that we will know that we're on the same page. And my Nigerian chair said I should emphasize on the issue of collaboration. So I'm looking forward to invitations from the Municipal Hub researchers on current researches they're working on, how that I can come in, how that my people from Port Harcourt can come in. And then eventually we may even come up with a title, so to say. So thank you. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you for your thoughts, Dr. Jacob. And I know, look, we are many here that are emphasizing on women. I hope you should know that. And I know that Professor Padma is as well on our team. Thank you for those points. But yeah, I took some points. I hope it answers your question. And also just to add to what Obed said, ICA is a very inclusive association. Professor Padma will agree with me that in ICA, there are no scholars on the margin. We're all here to do POM scholarship, and if you're here for that, that's fine. Of course, we are not here to push agendas beyond the confines of what we do, which is scholarship and practice of communication studies. So if we then move on to all of the responses that I don't know if, Toby, you may just show by raising your hand if you want to comment on that. Otherwise, I'll leave it for, oh yeah, you want to make a comment. Okay, I wanted to say that the other question was about policy. And again, I need to emphasize this. I mean, I've been called the Nigerian chair, and it's not for nothing, that this platform that we have is to showcase some of the works that we're doing in scholarship as well. So the platformization of research and scholarship, especially utilizing the digital space, will allow us to bring our conversations out of the classroom and also out of research groups to the public. And this is something that we're using and we'll continue to utilize, in the days to come. So Toby will make her comments and then Professor Padma will take it from there. Toby, please.
All right, thank you. The previous speakers have actually taken most of it out of my mouth. We need to talk about advocacy and policy influence, really. That through the networks and platforms offered by the ICA, communication scholars can influence policy and advocate for socioeconomic development. So scholars can use their research findings to inform policy discussions, just like Dr. Sarah said. They can propose evidence-based solutions, advocate for implementation of inclusive policies, and then by collaborating with policymakers, because we really need to get into that space, like she also mentioned. By collaborating with those policymakers, government agencies, and probably civil society organizations, communication scholars can facilitate positive change at the grassroots and systemic levels. So this is my contribution. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay. Hector, can I take over? Yeah. Yes. There's a question here in the chat box for Professor Pavrala. Would there be a middle ground possible for heterogeneous India in the communication sphere?
Yeah, I don't fully understand the question, but I just want to react to two things and then I'll attempt to answer this. I think one of the people from Nigeria who said about replacing one hegemonic system with another, I think hit it on the nail. I mean, I think it's a very important point he has made. And I think we should just underline that, because in the search for alternative, in the search for indigenous communication system or indigenous knowledge system, we should be wary of replacing one hegemonic system with another. That recognition that our societies are deeply hierarchical, heterogeneous, with different stakes in the system and so on. What we should be gunning for is that the most marginalized, the most voiceless get a voice. They need to define what kind of a indigenous knowledge or what kind of a communication system will foreground. About policy impact, I think these are all tough questions to ask at this point. I mean, we are all articulating a certain alternative conceptualization to begin with, and to demand that we also make a difference in the policy sphere. I mean, I know it's a collective demand on all of us. I think it's a bit unfair. I mean, this dialogue has to go on for a while, and it's not easy to enter the policy arena or to make policymakers understand these alternative perspectives very easily. But you need to keep at it, right? This is what I meant in my remarks about institutional listening. Yeah, we need to promote this idea that institutions need to listen to the voices of the most marginalized. Having said that, I mean, I don't know if you're talking specifically about the Indian context today. We are in a very delicate kind of a situation nationally today in terms of culture, communication, the national public sphere, who defines it, on what terms. Given our heterogeneity, there are a lot of contestations going on. I think through which, some kind of a interesting, more egalitarian public sphere will emerge, and the efforts of civil society organizations, of scholars who are working in communication, social sciences, should all be to see how do we move towards a point where we'll have a more egalitarian, more equitable public sphere, where all communities will have an equal voice and equal place in public policy. Yeah. So, I mean, it's easier said than done. I think somebody from the other side said something about utopia. I think there's nothing wrong with utopias. I think let's not, apologize for utopias. We need to strive for utopias. I think unless you visualize a utopia, unless you dream a utopia, you won't be able to do anything to achieve a utopia. So let's have utopian visions, as many as possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Pavrala. Can we have a comment from Professor Pradeep Nair also? Yeah.
Yeah. Padmaji, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yeah. So, Padmaji, see, this is not about, making technology or especially communication technology, because there is a lot of perception about, technology itself. The technology is bringing the world together, and technology is providing, more and more information to the maximum possible number. But it is also about to making the technology human. That is something, because what my understanding is that over a period of time, our obsession for technology has made technology, it has somehow, took that innocent, learning, the collective learning thing, somehow, it take it in a very different way. And what Professor Pavrala has said, that it is all about, let everyone have an opportunity to speak and let everyone have an opportunity to hear. That is what exactly is a world, where communication can contribute. Communication has the power to make a world a place where at least, we can, because what is happening, that there is a dominant narrative, and technology has created a kind of dominance. It is something about that the skilled people, they have more opportunities also, also to speak and also to get heard. So I 100%, and I agree with, this is a time, and especially, somebody, asked a very valid question about the negotiation, the policy negotiations and a dominant narrative. So it is very, very important, for us to think about, the people who want to say, and they have a reason to say, but, it's all a matter of time that whether we are going to allow them, and that is, the actual concern.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor Nair. I think it's time we wind up the session. Ica, can I wind up the session now?
Oh, yes, certainly, Prof.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. We had a great time over at Port Harcourt Hub. I think we should just buy our approach.
Okay. Yeah, at the outset, I would like to thank the ICA Regional Port Harcourt organizer, Ekta George, who came up with this idea of having a collaborative panel discussion, and a big round of applause for her, because I think, this was an idea which I didn't know whether we could pull it off, but it went on well. And I also thank the members who participated from the Nigeria Hub, Sarah, Toby, and Jacob. All three of you, a big thank you for taking your time off. And I remember one of you was hospitalized when we had the initial meeting, and he attended it from the hospital also. So thank you all for taking your time off and joining us from, and Ekta from Toronto. I'm sure you're attending the ICA there. So thank you for taking your time off and joining. And also the panelists from the Manipal Hub, Professor Pavrala, Professor Nirmal Mani Adhikari, and Professor Pradeep Nair. I know today Pradeep Nair is very hectic. There's an accreditation going on at his university, but he still decided to join us because it's at 4:30 in the evening. So thank you, Professor, for joining us. And I hope we take this collaboration forward between Manipal and Nigeria, sorry, and we do something more meaningful for the communication scholarship. Thank you all, and thank you also all the online audience who've been there and the people who've asked us questions. Yeah, thank you all of you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Please, can we put on our cameras and take a screenshot, please?
Please.
Can we put on?
Thank you too.
All cameras on, please. And we take a screenshot of it. Oh, I think I should put this on for the record. Okay. Please help me. Help me focus on the hub. We're taking a screenshot. Just this side where we have a segment. I hope people are doing the shots. You don't need to show like this. Just show like this. Show here. You can launch the bits so that it will launch the button. People flip the camera. Now you be professional. Okay. Manuel, you're widening it. No. No. You're going wide. That's still here. So I hope we are all snapping away. Thank you to everyone. You can unmute now and say our goodbyes. Have a very lovely day. We are joining another session in Toronto in the next minute. I know we are about a few minutes late, but we'll catch up.
Thank you.
Professors from Manipal, thank you so much. We had a good time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.